decided to tune in this morning, you made the right decision because this is going to be a super interesting conversation. I am joined by Victoria and David, both physicians working in very different environments. We're going to hear a little bit about what their day-to-day has been like, how their job has changed over the last few months, but also a really, really interesting project where they've been able to partner up with a technology company to help buildings be healthy, not just for today during this pandemic and re-entering buildings, whether it's office, retail, hospitals, safely, but kind of the implications of that technology as it's being implemented post-pandemic and back into kind of whatever our new normal is going to be. So hi, Victoria and David. Thanks so much for being on this morning. How are you?
We are great.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you guys. Thanks for joining. If you don't mind, introduce yourselves for our audience. Who are you guys? What do you do traditionally? And what is your job like right now?
Vicki, first. Dr. Addis.
Well, I'm Vicki Addis. I am an ophthalmologist and a surgeon at the University of Pennsylvania in Center City, Philadelphia. I see patients in the outpatient world. I operate, and our lives have definitely changed how we've sort of structured seeing our patients, running our clinics, and running our hospitals in the wake of this pandemic. And as we get back to work, we'll tell you about some of the strategies that we're using to do that safely.
Awesome.
I'm Dr. David Targan. I am an internal medicine physician. I've been practicing for about 15 years, and I do mostly primary care, and my patient base is usually 18 to almost 100, focusing on diabetes, hypertension, asthma, and other different modalities as well. So I do internal medicine. I used to be in a large practice. I now am out on my own, seeing about 350 patients as I now do concierge medicine.
And you guys are really working out in your life right now. So
I am actually working, and that was a patient calling on the back line, and I hung up on him. So hopefully I'm always saving lives, and he will be fine. Hopefully he'll call the...
We're all hoping that he'll be fine.
On my cell phone, right. So that's what I do, predominantly internal medicine. And our hospital, I work in a hospital setting. So I do mostly outpatient work, but I also see my own patients in the hospital as well.
Okay. What has it been like for you guys going to work in the last few months? What's the environment?
So I'll start with this. So, the entire paradigm has shifted in the way that we work now. When the epidemic first started, I went right to telemedicine, and that really is where many of the doctors now are and how they are treating patients. So using Zoom, FaceTime, and other different social media to get in touch with your patients. So in terms of seeing patients and how we see them now is usually on a telemedicine basis. So I see 75% via telemedicine my patients, and maybe 25% I see in the office if they have to come in. But you have seen a dramatic decrease in patients coming to the ER. Our ER here at Lankenau Medical Center has dropped about 30% because people are scared to even come to the hospital with the ongoing pandemic. So number one, telemedicine has been primarily a new facet in all aspects of medicine, whether you're an ophthalmologist like Dr. Addis, primary care. A lot of the doctors couldn't see any patients, like gastroenterologists that are doing procedures all day long, doing colonoscopies. Everything has been shut down. And now the aspect is, how do we get back to bringing patients back for preventative care? And a lot of preventative care has gone by the wayside. Mammograms have not been done. Colonoscopies are not being done. People with cancer are still being treated, but a lot of those patients are on immunosuppressive therapy. They are scared to death coming into the hospital, because I have a couple patients that are getting this therapy right now. So everything, the total milieu has completely changed, not only in getting into the hospital, but how does a physician works their daily routine. And a lot of other businesses have also been affected, such as my employees. I didn't have patients coming in, so I had to decrease their hours. And so there's all different things that patients and physicians have to work through during this time. I'll let Dr. Addis.
What has it been like for you, Vicki?
Yeah, I mean, I think my obviously doing an eye exam over the computer is challenging, to say the least. So we've done some telemedicine, but I've definitely been seeing patients through the pandemic, though the volumes have been decreased dramatically, like David alluded to. We have pretty much stopped elective surgeries, meaning cataract surgery and other surgeries that can wait. Obviously, trauma surgeries and other urgent things. I'm a glaucoma specialist, so I have definitely been doing some urgent procedures there. But volumes have gone down dramatically. We've definitely brought back people who definitely need to be seen. Our volumes are now probably about 50 or 60% of what they were every week. We slowly increase the number of patients that we're able to see again, but our waiting rooms have changed. Most of the seats have been taped off so that people can maintain social distancing. Everything is wiped down with bleach wipes between every single patient, every chair. We have someone pushing elevator buttons for you so you don't have to push them yourself. Temperatures are checked as you walk into the hospital. And really every aspect of how we have seen patients in at least the outpatient setting has changed. As David said, even people who sometimes do need to come are scared to come back. I think that's changing a little bit as we get into sort of May and now June, but for an extended amount of time, I mean, for several months, we really have definitely been severely affected.
So all of these challenges kind of have had you guys thinking about how is it reasonable that we can help physical spaces, whether it's a hospital from your context or a medical facility, but this applies and extrapolate that out to, like I said, retail, could be multifamily buildings, definitely office buildings, and maybe even larger venues, sports venues, music venues, malls, airports, etc. And so you guys are identifying some real just day-to-day issues. I think it's interesting because a lot of the folks that we talk to in the commercial real estate industry, we don't know what will happen. They're guessing, and making investments based on what we think people will do when they re-enter a workplace. But you guys are making decisions and kind of thinking about technology and helping build a healthy building environment from a day-to-day active experience, which is super, super unique. And so we're going to bring on the CEO of Cognition in a little bit to talk about the actual technology and what it does and how it will play out into our society and re-entering buildings. But talk to me a little bit about how you guys kind of the context for getting involved and taking some action to partner up.
So several years ago, we started a company called Healthcare Security Innovation. And that really was to help hospital systems kind of combat any sort of security issues that they would have, especially active shooter type situations. That's how it all started out. An active shooter, highly unlikely. However, it could happen, but more than likely is the active violence that occurs in the hospital all the time. Angry patients, someone that comes in is very upset. So things do happen. People get aggressive to nurses. So we were trying to figure out ways how to help the security aspect. And one of the ways was we were going to outfit the emergency room with bulletproof doors and making it much more secure. But it was very expensive. We worked with government officials, military, and a company that worked out in Indianapolis that primarily worked with schools, making them more secure.
Okay.
So we were trying to adapt the school fundamentals into a hospital system. Unfortunately, hospitals don't like spending tons of money when they just spent millions and millions of dollars on an electronic health record system. So to buy a $10,000 bulletproof door, it just doesn't make any sense. So they didn't want to do that. So we had to come up with ways, well, okay, what can we do? So that's when we met with Cognition, who utilizes artificial intelligence and a platform that, instead of changing the structure of a building, use the already instituted structure as well as all the cameras that they have and make the building smarter. So utilizing these camera systems, we have 3,000 cameras in our hospital system. Taking that data, putting it into a platform utilizing artificial intelligence, you can utilize that and make the property run smarter and increase ROI. So that's where we met with Cognition, who has been doing this for about 3 to 4 years in the retail and commercial sector, not in hospitals at all.
I see.
And they'll be able to tell you exactly how they utilize their platform and AI to increase ROI and to help out. So one of the main things that we did talk to executives, hospitals spend about $2 billion on fall risk. People fall all the time and sue. With this platform, you could utilize the cameras and make it so that you can find out who was actually falling and where, who was feigning the fall, who was falling, or patients falling out of bed. So we were in the process of trying to utilize that to get into hospital systems, and then COVID happened.
Right.
And everything changed overnight, that you can customizable use the same software platform and change it into something completely different. And that's what we did.
I see. And so it's really cool that there were existing case studies and use cases for this technology before COVID, because it speaks to ultimately on the other side, after we've re-entered and we're a couple years down the road and technology isn't being implemented just for the sake of dealing with this crisis, that the use case for this technology not only will still be there, but will continue to grow and probably, be repurposed. So
another instance, just to tell you, was going to be patient flow in the ER. You could utilize the cameras with the computer system. You would be able to know immediately how many patients are coming into the emergency room. Do I need to get more nurses on the floors? So it's more of helping out the flow. So we were trying to do that as well with an emergency room perspective. That's another way you could utilize the platform.
Right. And I think just for the folks that are watching or will watch this video later on, in the commercial real estate industry, we've had this new kind of aspect of technology and building sensors that has been around now for a few years and has been utilized. And people have, building owners and corporate real estate professionals are finding value in being able to not track productivity, right? And that's a lot of from an employee or consumer standpoint. They don't want that big brother aspect of tracking productivity or looking over your shoulder. But from a building owner or corporate real estate standpoint, being able to analyze human behavior within a built environment is tremendously valuable. And it's everything from how to build out a space and how to design that space to be most effective from a collaboration and design standpoint, to knowing how people are using a bathroom and how often to clean it, or when the trash is full, or ordering the right amount of food for a workplace cafeteria, right, so that you mitigate waste. So all those variables and much, much, much more is what building sensors have brought to the table. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we bring in Cognition into the conversation. But I think that this is one of those instances where this pandemic is accelerating adoption and use of this technology in such a way that becomes a top priority. So that's really, really interesting. I'm going to play a quick video that kind of brings it all together so people can visualize what this initiative is about, why you guys are doing it. And then we're going to go ahead and add our next.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
In terms of property and whoever's watching, the hospital property, what makes it different is that the hospital is open 24 hours a day. And that's what makes it completely different. How do you clean the emergency room? The ebb and flow of patients. When are they coming in? Why at some time do they come in more than other times? It's constant. So in terms of real estate, I'm sure there are buildings that are working 24 hours a day. And that's really one of the interesting things about a hospital. We never close.
Right.
And so looking at security aspects, which is kind of what we were trying to do initially, things happen all the time in a parking lot, around the perimeter when the residents are leaving at night. If the nurses are leaving at a certain time down in Center City, Philadelphia, they're being followed. So there's so many different things that go on surrounding a hospital that will transpire, or you can utilize the same case in other properties as well.
Right. Well, what's so cool about artificial intelligence and kind of what you guys are doing with this technology is you're saying, okay, I already have, how many did you say, 3,000 cameras in in your hospital?
Right.
And you guys are in Pennsylvania, for those who, were ever in from wherever you guys are. Just for context, you have 3,000 cameras. They already exist. That's money already spent. It's existing infrastructure. And all you're doing is bringing in and layering in the functionality of artificial intelligence, which is so tremendously powerful. And what I think is the most kind of cool aspect, if you will, is each building is its really own its own business. It's its own function, hospital, mall, office building. They all have wildly different functions. And even if you just stuck under the asset class of office, for example, even then, buildings are so different in what they need and how they are used. And so with artificial intelligence, essentially you're programming the building to assert the function that you need.
Right. You want to work smarter and not harder.
But with
it's customizable and would be done for you.
Customizable. And it's
fragile. What we need now in sort of this 1 year, 2 year, whatever, how long this pandemic lasts period is probably different than what we'll need in 5 years, 10
Absolutely.
years. And the fact that it's customizable, I think, really adds to the versatility and the attractiveness of the technology.
Right. And hospitals in different locations will need different things. I'm sure here in New York City, it's a totally different world than where you guys are or any other places in the country. And so I think that technology aspect, for it to be fluid and flexible based on use case it sounds so like just logical, but I think that it's not something we've really been able to do.
Someone that does have a retail property or commercial property, and at nighttime, 11:30, maybe you have 5 security guards at your property, and maybe you have 700 cameras. The cameras will utilize artificial intelligence to give you active intelligence. So if something is happening on the 5th floor, you're going to know immediately. So you can send the 3 people to go there. Otherwise, you're watching all these cameras. It's impossible.
Right. No, of course, you mitigate so much human error when you kind of leave the job to AI. And I think what's really timely in this moment is we don't have the human capital to send people to do these functions. And even if we did, of course, there's always that human error that exists. But in this moment, we don't have humans to be around the clock in a hospital, maybe.
Right.
I mean, maybe in a hospital of all places
Right.
now to perform these functions. So let's play the video so we can bring a Cognition into the conversation and talk about some of the functionality because I'm very excited. All right, I'm gonna show everyone and let's see, remove us.
Getting there.
Do you feel safe entering a hospital or other public building? Hi, I'm Dr. David Targan, an internal medicine physician on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. As our country reopens, it is imperative that we continue to track new infections and perform contact tracing to keep society safe. Let me show you how Cognition's novel technology platform will protect you, your family, and those around you. Turn your facility into a customizable, smart, healthy property. Using artificial intelligence and our novel software platform, FDA-approved thermal cameras will provide fast, highly precise measurements of body temperature. The system is non-invasive, contact-free, and may be utilized as a first checkpoint as individuals enter a facility. If a person with a fever is detected, that individual may be selected for additional screening questions or further diagnostic testing. This system allows for potentially infectious individuals to be isolated from other employees or patrons in order to keep the rest of the workplace safe. This platform has the potential to be integrated with other data points, including PCR, COVID-19 status, serological antibody testing, immunization status, perspiration, and even body movements such as coughing. These screening modalities can all be combined to predict whether someone should enter your facility. As a doctor taking care of patients with the COVID-19 virus, I urge you to create your own smart, healthy property with Cognition, because health and safety are of paramount importance.
Okay, we're back. I think that was cool because people got to, hopefully you guys got to visualize a little bit more than just us talking about it. And now we're really going to dive into some of the functionalities. So let's welcome our final panelist. This is fun because I don't usually do a panel on these shows. Hello.
Hi there, everybody.
Hey.
Hello.
Introduce yourself for us, please.
Hi, I'm Matias Klein. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cognition.ai. I'm really pleased to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Where are you joining us from?
I'm located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
All right, so we got a Philly crew going on. I am really, really excited to talk about kind of the functionality, and I think it was a great idea to show the video and so people can really see in action. It's hard to, I think, visualize what it feels like to go to work, wherever your work might be, and experience this kind of smart, healthy building tech stack and like what it feels like to go to work every day in this new world. So if you don't mind, give us a quick kind of like overview about Cognition, and then, you know, let's jump into the functionality a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. So, you know, Cognition created a patented enterprise AI for smart buildings. And basically that platform allows your building to see, think, and act on its own. And so we have, over the course of the last 3 years, built a number of off-the-shelf use cases, really mostly focused around security. This is what Dr. Targan was talking about. And then most recently, we shifted the system to support detecting, you know, the invisible threats, you know, not just guns and fighting and crowds, but actually detecting, you know, the threats around people coming in the building who might be sick, right? So we developed a entire COVID-19 emergency response solution set on top of our smart building AI platform. It really is what we think of as the full complement of what you need in a building to be able to safely open and to remain open. And so that COVID-19 emergency you know, response solution set includes really the first thing you need, which is to walk up to the building and have the door open. You need a secure entry, but you don't want to be touching the same, you know, handle bar, the same, swiping on the same badge readers that everybody else is using. Just from a hygiene perspective, you want the door to open and allow you to walk right in and not have to be you know, exposed to the virus unnecessarily. Right. Then when you go into the lobby, you know, you'd be walking right through a, you know, non-contact, high throughput thermal camera fever screening station, which will scan you to determine if you have elevated body temperature. If you do, you know, your badge won't work. You'll be, you know, directed to leave the building so you don't, you know, infect other people. If you don't have
not only are you not just permitted to enter, but actually your badge won't work.
Correct. Your badge won't work. You've got a text message saying, you know, you may not be feeling well today. You know, you've been authorized to work at home. Could you, you know, please, you know, exit the premise. Wow. And so that's the next step. But then, you know, the door opens up in front of you and you continue through the facility if you don't have a fever. And I think one of the things that, you know, it's really important to understand is, you know, fever detection is quite interesting technology, but it's not a magic bullet because, you know, most of the people who have coronavirus don't actually have a fever initially. You know, they're incubating the virus for, you know, could be 2 weeks before they even have a fever. I've heard that some people who have coronavirus don't ever have a fever. And so, you know, you're going to go right through that fever screening station, even if you have the virus. And but let's say you do that. You go through, you go to your office, you go to the cubes, you talk to your colleagues, you go to the cafeteria, and then you start feeling a little sick. You go home, you get a lab test with the doctor, and it turns out you've got, you know, coronavirus. At that point, you're going to call HR. You're going to say, listen, I'm sick. I'm not going to be coming to work for a few weeks. They have the very difficult task now of doing the contact tracing. They need to know, where have you been in the facility over the last 2 weeks? who else was exposed to you? I mean, who else was around you in the same locations at about the same time? And then after they've done all that work, they have to then notify all those people. So with our system, if you deploy our intelligent video throughout the building, you can basically, with one click of a button, have the full report of where that person has been, all the people who may have been exposed, and then you can send them all notifications with a text message or an email. So it takes a huge task and collapses it down into a one click of a button.
Wow. So we've covered a few aspects of the functionality so far. First being with a thermal camera of some sort. It's not a camera from you guys. You're making recommendations based on what you know is best practice, what's working best. But you're using some sort of thermal camera to measure temperature, make sure somebody doesn't have a fever. And even that process alone right now, I mean, David, Vicki, how does that currently happen in a hospital? And what's the challenge with how it's?
I just wanted to add on before I answer that.
Okay.
To Matias, there's two platforms. One is the thermal camera, and then all the other platform is based off of the already infrastructure camera in the building. Isn't that correct, Matias?
Yeah, well said. And again, to that point, we are hardware agnostic, so we plug right into whatever you already have, right? We make it smarter.
So also no investment cost of new infrastructure. If you already have cameras, if you already have some sort of technology in place to monitor, even just from a security standpoint, it's applicable in this case. There's no additional cost. Of course, if you don't have anything like that in place, you'll first look to implement, and that's where you guys can be kind of that trusted advisor.
Absolutely. And with respect to the thermal cameras, there's a lot of options that are out there. We have standardized around FLIR's high-end FDA cleared thermal camera units. They are expensive, but we believe they're the best in the world. And while we are hardware agnostic, so if you have another vendor you prefer that you want to use, we can plug it right in, no problem. What we are recommending are those units because we believe that they are going to produce a very accurate result when they're combined with our AI.
Got it. So now let's jump to how are currently you guys doing intake in the hospitals or medical facilities to see if somebody has.
So we used to have all different entrances into the hospital. Now we have employees and patients, and you can come through the ER. So there's actually 3 entrances that's it. So if an employee or let's say a patient comes in, they walk in, they have to be having a mask. If they don't, we will provide you one. They then come up to a screener, and the screener is 6 inches from that person.
So the screener is a person or it's a technology?
A person.
This is a person. The person's going to come up to you. Hi, it's great to see you. Welcome to the hospital. Who are you seeing? We'll say, I'm seeing Dr. Targan.
So a person has to approach whoever.
Yeah, the employee has to approach them this far away and touch them. They then, if you do not have a mask, we will provide you one. They then go to another person and they sit down. Where have you been? Have you been exposed to anyone with COVID? Have you traveled anywhere? It's a huge questionnaire trying to strategize or just trying to figure out whether or not you're healthy or not. If you test all these things, you go in. Now, initially, this is what we're doing now. We're still doing this. But what I noticed and what has happened, a lot of the employees were getting sick and they were dropping out. Because people were coming up without masks. Maybe they had COVID, maybe they didn't. And as we already mentioned, you could be asymptomatic. And they were getting exposed immediately. And so in this model that we're trying to do, you can be 6 feet away as an initial step with the thermal camera. If you don't have a fever, then I would say the next step would be doing it this way, just to make sure that it is comparable. But being 6 feet away really protects the employees and it keeps the patient away and out of the building.
Right. What I would just add to that is, what Dr. Targan is talking about is the camera has to be 6 feet away, but there doesn't need to be a person standing by the camera. It's totally automated. So you could actually have nobody anywhere near the entryway. And I think Dr. Targan brought up a really important point, which is the triage and the workflow process of entry and screening, right? There are multiple things that have to happen. It may be where you want to ask the person some questions. And if they don't pass the screen on the questions, they don't even go to take their temperature. It's like, do not pass go, you immediately leave. So I think, when you tie the whole system together from the questionnaires, from the screening of the fever to the touchless entry, you have the whole automated system that is much safer for that front line of defense for the building.
Sure.
In addition to the front line of people that have to stand at the entrance and actually screen these people, because we know they're frontline workers just like physicians, nurses, staff members, and obviously are at highest risk since they're seeing people as soon as they enter buildings.
Right, and they have to come in a close proximity of contact over and over and over again as their day-to-day job. Naturally, their level of exposure is, we don't need to do that to somebody. Amazing, right? And so now we have technology that can remove that barrier and solve that problem. This is just one very kind of step one of what you guys do.
Step one, getting into the building. Right.
What's that? Yeah, this is just getting into the building, right? So now once you're in the building, right? People, they walk in, they have this experience, they're coming to work, it makes sure that you don't have the temperature, you enter the building, then what? What else can essentially, with artificial intelligence, with this layer, what else can you teach this system to find out?
Yeah, the only thing I would add about the temperature is being checked at the inner campus, which in medical studies, I'm an ophthalmologist, but in medical studies has been shown to be the most reliable indicator of an internal body temperature in an external way of checking. So more reliable than a forehead, more reliable than a wrist, like they're using a pen, for example. But the inner campus has been shown to be the most reliable indicator of someone's actual body temperature.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point that she's making around the accuracy of the infrared thermography. We've all seen the non-contact thermometers that have to be 6 inches away from someone and they trigger them. They're not accurate either because they're just taking a side of your face or your forehead. Our AI is actually looking at the image and it's selecting, right in the inner eye, right there, right near the tear duct. So that's already going to be more accurate, but it's also taking all kinds of other intelligent video to normalize the reading and to make decisions around whether it should be adjusted. So for example, if you are in a very hot environment, you're coming in from outside, it's very hot outside, your baseline temperature is going to be a little bit higher. You don't have a fever. That's an adjustment from the outside. Sure. We also have, different normal average baseline temperatures as human beings. We're not all exactly the same. And so, you may be a little hotter than me. And so you're going to trigger the screen for fever just because you're normally hot. That doesn't make any sense. So our AI can make all of those adjustments and make a much more accurate determination and prediction about whether you might be sick than just a thermal camera can on its own. So that's really important.
I have another question
to that is even just sort of in the process of the pandemic sort of going on from March till now, we initially were, at Penn at least, we were stopping people who had a body temperature over 100. In the last few weeks, they've actually decreased that marker to 99. So because they were concerned with that 1 degree, if the thermometers are even accurate, number one, but also, as Matias said, the elevated body temperature from sort of being in the heat as the temperature goes up, if someone runs a slightly higher temperature than another. So we've actually decreased our threshold for additional screening.
Yeah, and just kind of building on that a little bit, if you think about, what else the system can do, because I think that you could change the question a little bit and say, what can't the system do? Because it can really recognize a tremendous number of things. And even things it can't recognize today, it can be trained to recognize those things in the future. So it's more, the question is, what do you want to be monitoring so that you could take action on, right? In this case, we're monitoring for someone who's got a fever. That's what we're looking for and want to take action when we see that. But we can also monitor for someone wearing a mask or people being too close together and not observing social distancing, or too many people in a room, right? Over capacity. All of that can come from the same system, right?
I want to ask you guys and pause here for a second because we're going to definitely explore the use cases for this, both right now and what it's doing powerfully right now, but also coming down into the future as people will get more comfortable implementing this kind of technology and also having it in their built environment. But to your point about how people are all different and the temperature only means so much, do you guys see, and I don't think I've talked about this with any of you guys, but it's something that actually makes sense to ask right now. Do you guys see potentially people's individual medical records coming into play in an either office environment, work environment, some sort of building level environment to identify maybe not just their temperature and what's normal for them, but if they have underlying issues, if they're immunocompromised, if there are some medicines that they're on are affected by whatever it is. I'm sure you guys know much better than me what use that could be to from a building level, but it's not a connection that we've ever seen really happen, very rarely.
Right. I mean, I would say that
answers, but what do you think?
All the legal ramifications completely out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going into a building versus coming into a hospital. When you come into the hospital, we already have your medical records. Could we overlay that from your electronic health record and layer that into it? Sure, we could. But as we showed in the video, when you're coming in, we could also do, pertinent to what's happening, what is your COVID status? Have you had antibodies? And basically, we could come up with an app that would be a medical passport. For whatever building you're in, we could come up with what do you want us to put into the passport to make it, what is the best predictive value to get it as safe as possible?
I wonder if this becomes an add-on to existing like tenant engagement apps. For example, in office buildings, we have a lot of communication apps that are offering services, offering amenities, just communicating, hopefully not in an emergency, but if you needed, to communicate with the building.
So this is definitely possible to do. I'm sure Matias would agree with me. You probably could add.
Well, I think you're right, Doctor, about the, implications, right? I mean, they're definitely, really important questions that we need to be asking and debating around, the privacy, the implications for, discrimination. Those sorts of things are important because we don't want to get the data intermingled with mixed use cases. I think if you're talking about the data in the hospital, they have the medical records, it's because they're there to help you get well. They're there to treat you, and so they need that information. But what we don't want is marketers having our medical records, right? That doesn't, or insurance companies who are going to deny us coverage because they know something that they don't need to know. So I think there's compartmentalization of all this information. But if you said, look, I got a building, its purpose, I think you said it really well, Marielle, earlier about, you said each building has its own function, right? And it has different needs and different uses. A hospital should be working to heal you. And if a hospital has a sensory system that's looking at the cameras and it's determining that, oh, you don't look well, you're coughing too much, your blood pressure's high, there's something off, it should let the doctors know, hey, we determined this about your patient that could help this person get well. So I think that people are going to be comfortable with that because it's helpful. But what they won't want it to do is leave the hospital then and be used by your employer to make an employment decision. There's nothing to do with that.
Right. And I think there obviously are privacy issues here, which, we are obviously not trained to, or at least I'm not trained to, or have the appropriate knowledge to actually say one way or another. But I would say that in terms of sort of if someone is at risk based on a high temperature, screening questions, this or that, whatever reason, I mean, obviously you want to keep the rest of the property safe. So we're not talking about discriminating against that person, but if you can sort of keep one person from infecting a whole rest of an office by just asking them to leave and seek care with their primary physician, or even helping them reach their primary physician, whatever you want to do. I think that's the main goal of the software, of the technology, of the intelligence system, rather than sort of exposing really someone's individual privacy, which we obviously would not want to do. I don't think that's sort of a standard in this country, and I don't think that will ultimately change. Right.
No, and our mission at Cognition has always been to help make the world smarter and more secure. So this is purpose built for the purpose. And what that means is we're not taking your data and selling it to marketers. We're not trying to influence you. The data is controlled by our clients for their security and safety needs, and they can determine the retention periods. They can determine the policies and the procedures that relate to their regulatory environment that they're operating in, and they can configure the system to reflect that. They can also configure their system to reflect their own policies and their own values. So it's not like one size fits all. I think you were talking about that earlier with the buildings. You need a software-defined system that you can tailor to your unique needs. Right.
And so and I think this could be an interesting kind of manifestation of on-site, in-building medical services, or having an in-building medical professional. So when there is an alert, or maybe that becomes the entity, maybe it's a third-party entity that holds the right to those records and information, so it doesn't mingle with the infrastructure.
I think we have to work through all that, and there needs to be controls and guidance and regulatory frameworks for it, for sure. But I think we're in the early days. I think if you go back to Dr. Targan's example of the active shooter, it's a really powerful one, because if you think about it, if you're in a building, you're in an office building, you're doing your job, you're going about your day, and some crazy person shows up with a gun and wants to kill people, Would you want to be in a building that can detect that and let you know so you can get the hell out of there?
Know exactly.
Or do you want to be in a building that doesn't have anything like that? And I think almost everybody I talk to goes, oh, if I had a building that could detect a shooter with a gun and tell me before they shot anybody and I could go hide or get out of there, that right. I definitely want that, right?
It sends an alert.
To the health use cases you were talking about. Do you want a building that could determine if one of your coworkers is sick and infectious so they can be quarantined and not infect everybody else? I think the answer is probably yes. But I want to make sure it's safe. I want to make sure my data is protected. I want to make sure my privacy is protected. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, that's correct. Right.
And so jumping into just some of the other functionalities so that we can talk about the implications of this technology. We kind of understand the behavioral aspect of artificial intelligence to the extent that you can teach it to do a function that you're looking for. So, for example, if a building owner or a tenant says, I want to identify when there are more than 6 people in this amount of square footage in this specific part of the office or building, I want this system to alert not me, but my security guard, maybe it's a community manager, maybe it's the office manager, so that they can be aware and take action, right? To go,
exactly.
Whatever the action and the protocol becomes. So right. The alerts when people aren't or behaving or the environment isn't conducive to being safe and alerting somebody to take action. So that's huge. And again, there's so many variables depending on the building, depending on whoever's programming this technology, what their use is for it, and it becomes that tool.
That's right.
Then you have this aspect of contact tracing, which is, I think, one of the most sophisticated parts of what you do right now for what it's being used for. And that means that if I come back to work, my employer says it's safe to come back to work. I come back to work, next week I'm homesick. Maybe I have coronavirus. All of a sudden, with the click of a button, maybe it's the person in HR in my company, maybe it's the building owner. And all of a sudden, somebody's downloading a report of every person I've been in contact with for the last 2 weeks, which, to be totally frank, if this was left up to human function, we would have a lot of challenges, right? That person doesn't remember who they came.
Which is why we do now. Yeah.
Right. Which is what we do now. And it actually do.
Yeah.
What's that, Victoria?
We have those issues now. I mean, we don't have enough of these people, but also most people can barely remember who they saw this morning, every single one, as opposed to who they saw for the past 2 weeks and who they spent more than a few minutes with. And I think it's a nearly impossible job, even if you have 1 million contact tracers around.
And even in today's world, like, you guys are still actively going to your place of work every day because, that's the field that you're in the medical field. But most people are not going to a physical place every day. So days start to blend together. Was it this week that I did that? Was it last week? Did I see that? What conversation was that? So I think there's so much room for human error, and just being able to mitigate that and say, with a report, with data, this is who you were in contact with. It mitigates so much risk of bringing people back and kind of that unknown aspect of who did they come in contact with. That's huge. So we have now thermal cameras for temperature detection. We have alerting, again, either a security guard or a community manager, whoever it is, to gatherings that are either too many people, too close, whatever it is. You have contact tracing. And then you have kind of this endless pool of potential other use cases, right? And that's kind of where we look to the future post-pandemic, even down, 2-3 years from now, where you can say, if you have this layer of AI functionality being, compatible with your existing infrastructure of cameras or security systems or building sensors or whatever it is that you're using, I can now teach it to do functions that are relevant and actionable for today. So, Matias, tell us about some of the use cases that you see potentially after all of this is over with, and we're not as concerned about the in-building health security, but you still have this technology that can do so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, safety and security is the base of human needs. I don't think we could do anything if we don't feel safe, we don't feel secure. And I think what the pandemic has shown us is that as soon as we don't feel safe, our whole world changes. We get locked down in our homes, and the economy crashes to a halt. So
Right.
I think everyone appreciates how important safety and security is across the board. Doesn't matter what business you're in. I would submit that a building that's safe and secure is a more valuable building, just period. But then you look at that and you take it further and say, what if a smart building, what can it do beyond the pure security? Well, look, if it has this safety and security, you're going to have less incidents of theft. You're going to have less catastrophic damage. You might avoid an active shooting scenario. So your claims are going to go down to your insurance, right? If you have
an AI
making all these.
This is a big one. This is big, right? And
absolutely.
It's one of a million things because this technology is really limitless with what it can do.
That's right.
In the current state of commercial real estate, at the end of the day, before all this started happening and pushing forward innovation and making it more of a priority for building owners, the things that they were prioritizing before this were, how do I save money? How do I increase my net operating income? How do I do more with the existing asset? And so being able to mitigate risk and show an insurance carrier that with data and proof that you've mitigated that risk so that you can measure and take a premium that matches the risk that you're actually assuming versus what the market might dictate in that moment.
Absolutely. So just look at it like this, right?
Incredibly
if you have a safe, smart building, it's a more attractive building for people. They want to be in that building versus one that's not. If you have less risk, your claims, your insurance your premium is going to be lower. And if you have an automation using AI in your smart building, your operating expenses are going to be lower for a higher level of service. So you're going to have a better tenant experience. You're going to have lower costs overall. So you take that whole mix of things, your property value just went like this. And the cost of the AI is a fraction of what that net asset value increase could be when you really put this at scale and do all the use cases. So you start talking about obviously security and safety, but then you start looking at tenant experience, visitor management, you start looking at energy savings. Well, we already know there's no one on floor 5. Why are all the lights on? Why is automatically turning stuff down, lowering the HVAC? There's a lot of examples of these kinds of AIs being used for energy savings. But think about having one brain in your building that you connect all your stuff to, regardless of what vendor it comes from, and it organizes it into something that is much more consistent, much more easy to manage, and drives all of that value creation and curation to drive the value of your property up. I think that is a game changer for building owners, for commercial real estate. And I think buildings that are not smart buildings in the future will not be as attractive when they go up for rent or go up for sale than comparable buildings that have been had that upgrade.
No, and I think it's something that I talked about with both of you, David and Victoria. But I think that generally commercial real estate, people invest in infrastructure for the long term, right? Building systems, materials. You might pick one light that is, all of a sudden there's millions of that one light that you chose, in a large commercial building here in New York, for example.
Yes.
And so we can't build anymore for being done. And what I mean by that is, if you think about building a website even, or a piece of technology, you don't build it and then say, this is done. You build it knowing that it's an evolution, right? It's constantly updating. It's constantly getting better.
Yeah.
So buildings have to be the same, as we just clearly see that culturally, we're consistently needing different things from space, right? Yeah. And depending on the asset class, depending on the type of building, you're using it functionally so different, right, from one another. And so because of that, the tech stack, the foundational infrastructure of the building has to be fluid. It can't be stagnant, right? We can't hedge a bet today in infrastructure that hopefully will be relevant in 100 years. We know right now that won't be the case.
Well, I'd submit that you just made the case for a software-defined, smart infrastructure for your building, because if you think about it, it can't be hardware. Hardware ages the second you drop it in, and it can't be updated unless you rip and replace. So what you want to do is have a really flexible software that you can plug your various hardware vendors into, that you can plug your other software components into, and you can make some sense out of all this madness and really have a much more efficient operation. I think that's the game changer that buildings really just don't have. And if you have a flexible system like that, you have the agility, you can respond quickly to the new thing that happens. Like the guys that had, or the gals that had the COVID-19 emergency response solutions in place before COVID, they were able to turn stuff on right away. Everyone else is going, oh, how do I get my hands on this equipment? And now we're sold out. There's an 8-week backlog, and you're into the fall before you can have this stuff stood up. So I think it's people need to be thinking strategically in the long run, absolutely, but put in something that's flexible, that's not going to lock you down, it's not going to lock you into a specific vendor, right? You need an open platform that gives you the power over your data and your operations and the vendor ecosystem you want in your smart building.
Right. And it's no different in the medical industry, right? You guys, I mean, making investments in new technology and transparency in being able to capture data about patients from a more granular and more centralized. And it's also a slow process, just like in commercial real estate. These are massive investments when they're made, and they need to be really strategic. And so what do you guys
think that would be sort of the electronic medical record? You hope from the beginning that you've invested in one that, number one, is going to stay around a long time, but number two, that is adaptable as things change. You can add different functions to it. Can you add different whole sections? Can you, as new technology comes in ophthalmology, for example, can you link that software with all these different machines and technology that does change and goes up and down? So I think that that's a sort of a small parallel, but
absolutely.
Now has totally changed medicine, and obviously, if you were not smart about how you adopted it, some large hospital systems have gone through 2, sometimes 3, huge EMR systems because they didn't choose the best one initially, and then have to throw that one away and basically reinvest in another one. So
it's not just the capital investment, it's the whole change management. And you need to like train, right, all of you guys in using one system, and then next year you're using another system, and which one can I rely on? I'm not even going to bother using this system because I know next year there'll be something else, right? And now you have all these additional purposes for medical records in today's world that, man, thank goodness you had these investments into going digital. And it's no different in commercial buildings. In an emergency response situation, emergency responders, whether it's, police, it's fire department, it's, maybe, hopefully not, but active shooter situation, first responders are handed right now a binder of PDF floor plans. And each floor plan is, a different floor. Hopefully you don't have a 70-story building like you do many of them here in New York City, but across the country, things look different. And they're meant to use that to figure out where they're going and why, and make decisions in a split second in really high stakes situations with a binder of PDFs. And so a lot of that is starting to translate to a digital interface. But can't we do better than just translating PDFs to be digital? How are we giving, what information can we give in that split second? Just like you guys are going to get a patient record and say, this is the information I need to help this patient. What are we giving first responders entering a building in terms of arming them with the tools and information they need to do their job best? And ultimately, we all win from that. So
no question. And I'll just give you to jump on that use case. If you had our system deployed in a building, and the first responder showed up, all they need to do is connect to the Wi-Fi network, and they'd have the maps, they'd see the floor plan, they would see the detection of the person with the gun, they'd know he's on floor 3 in room 4. They would have all of the intelligence they need to go in there and safely intervene. The problem right now is a lot of these heroes, they go into these buildings and they don't know what's around the corner.
No.
It's very dangerous, and God bless them for taking that fight to the bad guys. But I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't want that job. It's extremely scary to just be walking around a building not knowing where the guy with a gun is.
Or even it could just be hazardous material, right? Some sort of hazardous material spill or accident. It could be a multitude of things. And a couple of weeks ago on the show, we had Lori Caruso, who has an emergency communication tool for buildings. And she was bringing up the fact that a lot of buildings aren't wired for consumer connectivity, just like mobile connectivity on an individual basis, in places that aren't dedicated for work, right? So common areas could be the basement, could be an old data center that's not being used. All of those places where somebody may need to call 911 or emergency service, a lot of times you don't even have the right connectivity. And so I think what you guys are bringing to the table, granted you have building level connectivity, which is now much more necessary than ever has been. But granted, you have that basic layer. You guys are bringing kind of this tool set, this tech stack that helps building owners just catapult into the future in terms of safety, cost savings, just real-time data in a centralized way. And
yeah, that's a very good way to think about it. It really is a toolbox to be applied to the use case and the needs that customers have. But that being said, we're not giving you a toolbox and saying, oh, go figure out how to build a house or an extension to your house. We're coming and saying, we have all this off-the-shelf stuff. You could turn it on and use it right away and get value. But here's the toolbox too, which we use to build all these things, and we'll show you how we did it. And now you could go build your own stuff too, if you want to, if you're so inclined, right?
Today, right, to be given technology or try to first learn about a technology that's not part of your core competency, that never had to be implemented in your building or your portfolio, and have to not only make the decision, spend the money, but learn how to do it and functionally implement, right? And hope that people in your organization can be along for that ride of change management in an active way, while everybody is, their mind is somewhere else. And so I think this is all super, super interesting. I do want to jump into future use cases, because I think this is where not only the technology really shines, but it helps people visualize a world beyond this current state of pandemic and what functionally these technology implementations will do for us as a society. So I think, and before we jump into that, I think it's important to realize the context of from a human standpoint, how people view building level technology. So we've had building sensors for the last few years. I think that there is this aspect of, from an employee standpoint, I don't want that big brother aspect watching me, monitoring my productivity potentially, seeing who I am. You have cities like San Francisco that have banned facial recognition technology. As Americans, we value our right to privacy, all of these aspects, right? And that was pre-pandemic. Now you fast forward a little bit, and people, their perspective has totally changed. Right now, not only am I okay with building sensors for the sake of my public safety and those around me, because I have to go home to my family at night, right? And I need to be safe. But I actually am okay with the camera seeing exactly who I am, maybe connecting to potentially other information about me that can fill in the picture of keeping me healthy and those around me. And I may even be fine with waiving some of my right to privacy for the sake of these functions, right? So that's a big cultural shift in our society. And it will have implications, good, bad, and indifferent, right? And so one of the things that potentially we talked about could come down the road in places like malls and large venues, public spaces, is really aiding authorities and first responders in identifying either a person that's a threat or some sort of threat. It could be a lost child, and just helping discover where that child wandered off to in a crowd. But all these really tangible functions that could play out in our society post-pandemic. So do you want to talk any about to that at all? All of a sudden people are really accepting that this is cool technology that's needed and functional. And they're
I think obviously it's very powerful, and I think just not focusing on healthcare specifically, but talking about the broader set of use cases. I think there's quite a lot. But again, this is where you have to be very thoughtful about what we're doing, right? Because we can't just roll this out and detect everything, and everyone has access to everything. People would be freaked out over that. I think compartmentalizing is very important, right? Where security and safety, is one need that people have. And what we don't want is our marketers, we don't want our politicians getting our security and safety data, right? Because none of their business. It's for keeping us safe. So I think if we can build a system where that can be ensured, and I think people will accept it. Absolutely. You talk about, in your mall, if you lost your child, where did they go? And the mall cop can come and open up his app and say, oh, he's right over there, right? I mean, who wouldn't want that? That would be awesome, right? So I think there's definitely use cases where people are totally comfortable in security. I think there's a carve out, but it's very important, right? There's almost a clash of cultures or culture of ideas around this. Our idea is that the customer should be in control of the data that they're generating, and that they should have the ability to implement it in a way that's consistent with their policy and procedures and the regulatory environment that they operate in. What we don't believe in is reselling data. We don't believe in tracking people for the purpose of influencing them. So we have a whole code of conduct around what we consider proper use, what we will license our technology to be used for, and what we won't. So for example, we will not use facial recognition in public. It's counter to our code of conduct, because in order to do so, you need to have transparency, number one, so people know it's being done. Number two, you need to have opt-in, right? They need to have consent to say, I agree to allow myself to be used in that system. And they have to have number three, a way to get out of it if they decide they change their mind. So a right to be forgotten. If that's not available, there's no ethical way to deploy facial recognition in public, is my opinion. So we won't do it. But I think, other use cases are very, very straightforward. Gun detection is not violating someone's privacy that we detected a gun, right? That's actually just helping keep things safe. So I think there's a balance there. It's very important to be thoughtful about how we do it. And again, our company, Cognition, our approach is to put that decision to the customer, give them the controls, to the car, so they can step on the gas or push the brake or take the off ramp as they see fit for them, right? It's not our decision to make. And I don't want to take any of my customers' data and make decisions about what is proper use of it. That is not our game. We don't have a cloud. We're not aggregating data. We're not mining data. We're not reselling data, and we never will, because we have no interest in that business model. So you got to look at companies that have a different business model. Companies like, Facebook and Google that are trying to sell you, sell ads.
Right.
Do you want them doing that for you? Maybe, maybe not. I personally don't. So I think our model is a little different. I think what our model is give the customer that control. Let them implement it. I think that's, again, it's a different set of ideals and values and principles around our technology and how we will sell it and how we'll implement it. I can't regulate or even opine on what the proper use of the technology is nationally or globally. I think there's a lot of people have opinions about that, and they should debate those, and that should come forward in policy and in law. But we have our own approach with our technology and what we think it could be used for. And we are personally taking what we think is the high road, is using the technology for safety and security, using it to make things more efficient, right? So for example, use cases, you asked about future use cases, we're going to be lighting up, all kinds of energy savings use cases on our platform. We think that's not a violation of privacy. That just reduces greenhouse emission and saves building owners money. What's bad about that? Nothing. Right?
See that as a society, we need to lower our contribution as commercial real estate industry professionals to carbon emissions as much as possible. And it just makes sense for building owners to save money on that and not waste.
I think so. And what about putting in one platform that could do all of those things? That's when you get ROI. That's where your ROI starts to compound, is you bought this thing for COVID, but then you added in this visitor management automation that made your tenant experience better. And then you bought this thing for COVID, but you added in package detection to triage all your package delivery. And then you bought this for COVID, but then you added in the gun detection to make your building safer. All that stuff is on the same rails. It's on the same platform. It's not a throwaway. It's not a stopgap. It's not a silo.
So what, and doctors, please chime in with your experience. Are there challenges right now in implementing this technology in a hospital setting? Because obviously we're talking about how much it makes sense and just naturally how much this helps. But now I also know, because I've been working in commercial real estate now long enough, that things take time. Everything takes longer than you expect. And there's a lot of pushback on doing things that are not the traditional way, right? So are you experiencing challenges from an infrastructure standpoint in getting this implemented?
I think that there's always challenges. Even before this occurred, there were challenges. I think that hospital systems versus a lot of other industries, hospitals are very late to adapt to technology. And I think that most hospitals, our hospital system, spent $150 million on electronic health record system. And when you spend that much money, you have to look at, well, how are we going to spend more money on something like this? But when you look at our platform, it makes sense to me, at least, that you're going, it's an add-on, like Matias was saying. You can add it on and it can learn, and each hospital can utilize the technology in different ways. So for me, it makes sense. But I think that right now, at this moment in time, everyone is worried about the COVID, what is happening, and the medical aspect. So I think that the main focus, that's why we changed, is basically going into the hospital systems, tracking them to this COVID platform. And then once you're in a hospital system, then we can talk about security aspects. Then we can talk about other ways you can utilize the same platform of AI and asking them, what do you want us to do? And initially, I think I told you before, one of the key things was fall risk. Hospitals spend $2 billion a year on falls, people falling, patients falling, and suing the hospital. This technology, you could utilize already existing camera structure, not the thermal camera, but the cameras throughout the hospital. If someone falls, you're going to get an alert. I know exactly what time it was, where it was, and what happened. Were you feigning? Did it really happen? I know immediately what occurred. So you can save money that way with the insurance company.
Absolutely.
That is one way you could use this. And I think that was where we were trying to pitch it to the hospital systems. But I think that as things change in the world now, I think that we just need to adapt. And that's what this technology brings to the table.
Right.
Yeah. And I spent almost a decade in healthcare IT before I started Cognition. And we were building electronic medical records and claims processing and all kinds of stuff at scale. Eventually our business was acquired by McKesson. But the notion that hospitals are slow to adopt, I mean, that's out there. People have talked about that. But what I've seen is that physicians are very fast to adopt technology that works, that's easy, that's economically viable, right? If there's a clear case for it, they use it right away. The issue is when you get these giant, cumbersome, initiatives that cost tens of millions of dollars, and then when they finally go live, nobody likes them. Like they're difficult to use and they're complicated, and so that's what we have with electronic medical records. So it's a whole pushback on adoption there. It wasn't that the technology wasn't needed; it was painful to use. I think when you look at this technology, just in contrast, because we took a lot of those lessons learned around what didn't work in healthcare, this is easy to use. You just walk right up to the door and it opens. You don't even need to find your badge anymore, right? You walk through the building and your contact tracing is happening. You don't have to actually install any app. You don't have to change your behavior. You don't have to do anything. So adoption of that is going to be through the roof. The other thing I would also say is if the experience is better, everybody wants it. They don't have an adoption problem. So we put the touchless entry into a few buildings. As soon as we turn it off for testing purposes, we get immediate complaints. What's happening? And we say, well, no, look, just use your badge. The badge is still working. And they go, oh, we don't. That's horrible. We have to go back to that, So I think adoption comes down to the case, the business case. It's sound. It's a quick ROI, and to the product. The product is easy to use. It's delightful. It creates a much improved experience and returns. When you have that, adoption is easy. I really think so.
No, I agree with you. And I think that we all have an expectation of technology working with ease, right? We all, you have whatever it is, mobile banking, in our real lives, maybe we were taking Ubers and food delivery, probably still quite a bit and an uptick on that. But we have all of these on-demand apps, right? So in our daily life, to just do the functions that we want, we expect technology to work in a certain way. And so when it's bulky and it's not easy, you just don't use it. And then it becomes just a line item on someone's budget and it gets cut the next year, right? So I think that just building technology for people, right? For us as users, whatever that means. I mean, how many dashboards can we sign into every day?
Absolutely.
It's just, you have to make it easy for people. And so I think there's an investment in the technology, but then there's just as much, if not more, of an investment into the actual user experience and change management so that people can make it part of their daily functions. And so I think there's both, right? And the cost of the technology is not just the beginning and end of the investment. And I think that's what people.
Yeah. Well, but on that cost point, though, just keep in mind, right? The EMRs, the medical record systems, they cost tens of millions of dollars in hospitals to implement them. And you have to make that decision up front before you even get to determine if it was a good, idea. With these building systems like that we have, you can start small. You could put the system into one room, one data center in your building. You don't need to do the whole building. You could just start with one thing, get the lessons, get the experience, see the ROI in your environment, and then scale up. So it's a totally different model. And this is what we learned, obviously, from the cloud and the agility that gave us. That's the model people want. They want to start small and get big when it's proven.
Well, that makes sense, right? You want a proof of concept or a case study to say and justify a budgetary spend of, whatever it's going to be across a portfolio of buildings. And I think what's so interesting in commercial real estate is you have a lot of landlords and building owners that have a large portfolio. And I've seen a couple, really only like one or two, that has used their portfolio to pilot technology in one building and then decide to implement across the whole portfolio. It just makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so what you're saying is, we have that luxury in commercial real estate where I think a lot of people still think that it's such a massive leap to try something. You're really talking about from a healthcare perspective, medical facility perspective, that's really where you have to make the one decision. In real estate, we have more flexibility, and that's a luxury. It's a beautiful thing. I don't think people really have that context or perspective from a landlord side of things. Traditionally, it's just a lot of money up front. And even when we started DisruptCRE 6 years ago only, which feels like lifetimes ago to where we are now, you didn't really have much information, like real data about how things would go if you implemented XYZ technology. Right? There was no use cases or case studies or ROIs or any tangible data. It was just, here's this great technology we just launched, and hopefully it works out for you guys, building owner. Right? You just made this investment, hope it works out.
Leap of faith. Yeah.
There wasn't a problem that they knew that they were trying to solve for. It was just, we need technology because that's what the culture is saying. So I think now it's a really amazing time to be able to see real information. You guys are able to bring a lot of that transparency into information from an operational and functional standpoint, which is really cool. So
artificial intelligence also is changing medicine. I mean, it has many functions so it's not a new concept sort of in healthcare, in medicine. We know that computers can actually read, for example, optic nerve scans and retinal photos better than humans can, better than retinal specialists. So, and that technology is slowly getting better and potentially can be used sort of in the clinical setting. And there are studies sort of going on in real time with those kinds of issues. So it's not a new concept in medicine. I think it's new in terms of putting into technology and building opens and sort of and adding it to sort of security of buildings, but in hospitals, for example. But I think that it's being used in medicine. And I think it should be something that people should latch onto because it has had a lot of proven results in healthcare.
So it's being used in medicine to practice medicine and functionally treat patients, which makes sense, right? We can only do so much as humans, and naturally in every aspect of being a human, there's room for human error. So of course we're using technology, that makes sense. But despite that, there's still challenges in implementing this technology from an infrastructure standpoint, which is so fascinating, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's a proven concept in terms of results. So that's really interesting. I guess, unless anybody has something specific to add right now, I would love to hear what you guys think are some of both the exciting things looking to the future, as well as some of the challenges, as it seems likely more and more buildings, and from just a built environment standpoint, we're going to have a lot more information.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I think the COVID emergency has really, highlighted this, the whole fever screening technology. There's been, intense demand around it. And it's a nice starting point, the fever screening technology, right? Just to drop that into the lobby and start screening people. There's been just intense demand in putting those things into buildings. But I think that's just part of this entry process. That's just part of the screening process into your building. So I think when people are looking at it as like a stopgap, I need a screening for COVID, that's not the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is I need an AI-powered screening going forward. And if it helps me with the COVID now, that's great. That's what I need. But how do I make my tenant experience, my visitor experience seamless going forward? Let's say take the thermal camera down because the pandemic is over. I don't feel like I need it anymore. You could still have a totally automated entry. You have your visitors come in. They don't have to do anything, right? They just get the text message saying, welcome, they just walk right in, and the system knows that they're authorized to be there, right? We have a whole integration of our platform with OpenPath and with Envoy, which are two of the leaders in access control and in visitor management. You layer in our tracking, our identity verification, and we create a completely seamless visitor experience. It's incredibly better than what people are doing now. And it's better than just having one of those products on its own, right? OpenPath's a great product. Envoy's a great product, but by itself, it's not what you need. You need a full solution for your building. We tie all those things together and make that visitor management super, super easy. Now think about that in the context of a hospital. Visitor management hospital is you go to the hospital and you need to be admitted. And
Right.
visitor management, when you leave the hospitals, need to be discharged. Those processes, and no offense to any of the medical profession, my brother's a doctor, my dad's a doctor, they're horrible. They ask you the same questions over and over again. You come back and they say, hey, what are your allergies? What are your medicines? Where have you? And you're like, I already answered that 10 times. So think about the ability to automate the entire admission and discharge process and make it like Easy Pass. Well, that's a Pennsylvania thing, but like a fast pass for Disney. You just walk in and walk out. Like patients would love that, right? I think that's an opportunity that we have to make the hospital experience for patients easier, simpler, more convenient. Right now it's onerous. And if you're sick, the last thing you want is to have to fill out a bunch of forms, have to be waiting in the waiting room for an hour, and then go up to the front desk person and say, I've been sitting here for an hour. And they go, who are you? So that's all be a way, that's all go, by the way of the dodo bird, and people can just walk in the hospital and be admitted, right? And all that stuff checked automatically. And then maybe if you have the thermal camera and you add some of the other use cases that the doctors were talking about, you could maybe have the hospital actually do a pre-screen on you while you're sitting there waiting to even be seen by a medical professional. I think the opportunity for full automation of the entry and the exit is incredibly powerful, right?
And doctors, I mean, there's a cost to all of the intake professionals that are getting sick because they're in close proximity, taking temperatures and doing intake with just the general population of people who are coming to the hospital and medical facilities.
Absolutely.
There's a hard cost to them not being at work and them eventually getting sick and being home. And these all factor in.
And to all your commercial real estate, owners and operators. I mean, you go into a high rise in New York City and go walk up to one of the front desk people to try to get into the building.
Right.
It's about as painful as being admitted to a hospital. Right. Which
is getting better with visitor management.
It is. Absolutely getting better. And that's on the right path, right? But I'd like to see that be totally seamless, like the way it would be if you just walked in and went right to your floor, right?
Does that sound good to you guys as doctors?
I think what this pandemic is doing for us, at least where I work, is it's showing us how inefficient the system is, even on sort of a very local level. I mean, we have traditionally long wait times where I am. We have lots of different tests. People are on different floors. We have systems to determine where people are. Because of this drastic decrease, which we're slowly ramping up, but a drastic decrease in the number of patients that we've been seeing, we've really been able to sort of look at the system. Where are the slow points? Where are people sort of getting lost in the system? Where is the system failing? And I've been trying to, and I think it's working, to make it more of an efficient system. Rather, if I have a patient who has to come in and get 2 tests before they see me, why do they need to go back to the waiting room for 15 minutes? Why is everything sort of mixed up? And so I think that it's teaching us how to make the system more efficient so that the patient can come in, their lack of sort of, especially now, we're trying to decrease the amount of time, for example, that people are in waiting rooms, social distancing. We don't want to have to clean the chair after a person sits there 18 times during the visit. So I think that is making the system slowly more efficient. And hopefully as we go back sort of post-COVID, eventually that it will stay hopefully efficient in the long run. I think for me, I think this is showing us sort of what humanity is capable of. I think that it shows sort of the creativity of the human spirit, of human brains. I think people have really, it's obviously an extremely difficult situation and we're not close to being over yet. But I think it's showing us sort of where we can sort of go as a society, what works, what doesn't, and showing us really sort of teamwork, how teamwork, technology, people all sort of come together and ultimately sort of think through problems and ultimately can hopefully get to the other side of this.
I have chills.
I don't have chills.
No, it's true. And we talk about it a lot on this show. Aside from, a lot of the folks on the show who are, talk about just our daily blessings and like what we can be grateful for, just waking up healthy and being safe and all of that. I totally agree. I think people are resilient, and in times of hardship and challenges, I think we rise to the occasion with creativity and innovation. And I love what you said about kind of showing us, like, this time has showed us the inefficiencies that exist. And it's not just showing us, we feel it, right? We feel it from a human standpoint. We feel it from a financial standpoint. We feel it for you guys, it's your day-to-day job actually going to the facilities where you work and seeing people, not just your employees, but patients. So I love it. I love it. David, let's hear what you are excited for, or even challenges that you think might still be coming down the road?
I think that this technology definitely will make things much better, and just trying to get this implemented in the hospital right now where we are, especially with what we talked about, the people tracking, the touchless entry, the fever detection, utilizing all the cameras, all of that taken together will make the experience so much better. And I think that we just are at a pivotal point. How do we implement this in the hospital when finances are paramount? And are we going to spend money on this? And it is an expense. Obviously, it's an expense.
Right.
To the executives, why are we going to do this?
Right.
And trying to discuss with them, is it worthwhile? And in my mind, I think it definitely is. But just trying to change them or just have them understand what we're trying to achieve, I think it definitely is a positive outcome, not just in a hospital, but also it transgresses all these other real estate properties you're talking about.
Yeah, but I think also we're in the first inning of this, right? And so a lot of it is education around what the value is and how it actually performs in the real world. I think, again, when people see value and they understand it in their own environment, they don't have any problem spending money to secure it. The issue is they just don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And so if you go and you bring a completely new category of capability to the world, the first thing you're going to see when you show it to someone is they're going to go, I don't understand that. I've never seen it before. I don't know what that can do. You'll make all the claims about what you believe it can do, and they're going to say, I don't believe that because I've never seen that in my world. So that's a process that only changes through time as people get exposed and they learn and they have experiences, and then they can validate and they can publish their findings. That's happening now. That's been happening for 3 years. We started, that's exactly our kind of origin story, right? The first conversation about what we wanted to do, it was like quizzical looks on people's face, like, is that a thing? Like, do people need that? Will that work? And now the customers we have, they're happy. I mean, they have huge ROI. They're loving it. They're expanding. We go now take those stories to our new prospects, say, look, this is what our customers have done, right? This is what JP Morgan is doing in their healthcare payments division. This is what's going on in the largest smart city project down in Tampa. Here's what they've realized. Here's the ROI they have. Here's how they did that. And here you can call them. And now the whole dynamic changes. No longer, is this legit? Does this work? Is it real? It's like, oh, I can actually do this. And it's affordable. And ROI is there.
Right.
What am I waiting for?
Well, they're going to invest in something, right? No matter, obviously you have enterprise companies, large corporate, REITs, building owners across the country and across the world that have to buckle down, right? They have to cut costs, but they also have a responsibility naturally, as they do want people to come back into these spaces. There is an investment that will have to be made from a safety standpoint. And so I know a lot of folks are doing the low-hanging fruit stuff that doesn't have to be long-term investment, because who knows in a long-term sense what we'll need from our spaces. Actually, who knows really in the short term, but we know we do need them. But they can, so they're doing low-hanging fruit stuff like, furniture ordering.
Please, rapid response.
But they will have to make some sort of investment beyond that infrastructure standpoint.
Well, these things pay for themselves easily. And I don't think we have any debate on that from an ROI side when we show it to people. I think the issue just is, how do you get started? How do I dip my toe in the water so I can experience that ROI myself, and build that case in my portfolio, and then build the case for scale? If you're talking about people right now who want to cut costs, this is the perfect way to do it. If you have to reduce, let's say, for example, your front desk staff, or you have to reduce your maintenance team, or you have to reduce your property management team or your security team, you leave the building at risk. You can't not do those things. So use an AI to augment the limited human resources that you have to make them more effective. That is your only best option.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely. And also, like you said before, just not also have those frontline people in jeopardy, jeopardizing their health coming to work every day,
sure.
Intake and things that we can accomplish with technology.
I think employee buy-in to sort of that this property is safe. The people that I'm working with on a day-to-day basis are healthy. I think that's a big part of this. I mean, you have to make people feel safe as you slowly bring them back to work, or who would really want to come back if they think that they're just going to come get exposed, even if they're not worried about themselves, they're worried about their family, they're worried about their kids, they're worried about their parents. I think that's a big part of making a property feel safe, so that the employees who work there every day actually want to come back and feel safe enough to do so.
a very humanistic moment. And I think that, yeah, that people want to feel safe in buildings, and that has never been more of a priority, actually the attention on the individuals coming to the building every day than it is right now. So I think that's interesting. It's an interesting motivator, right? Because this is the number one problem that building owners, corporate tenants, that's what their challenge is. It's we can do all of the necessary things to, that we're supposed to be doing, but it's like, will people feel safe? You can do what's written in the handbook, but then you have human behavior, which is the unknown. And that's kind of what we're all waiting to see is, we can implement all the technology in the world, but until we see what humans will actually do in these buildings, who knows? And that's what's cool about AI is it can kind of adapt to the needs of how people are functioning. Once we start coming back, it's flexible. And so that's really what we're looking for. That's what I think defines a smart building at the end of the day, today and moving forward into life, is a building that can be functionally flexible for their purpose, right? Because we know culture is changing. We know that people need different things from space. I mean, defining what the purpose of going to a space is right now. If I'm going to be asked by my employer to come into a commercial building, there better be some real value that space is bringing to my day. Is it making me more productive? Is it, and maybe I'm a scientist or a doctor, or I build robotics or produce music where I function, like I need the tools, right? And that's a reason to go physically into a space. But if I'm just, an employee in an office, what is that space contributing value-wise to my day or my productivity or my life that I couldn't do from elsewhere where I feel safer? So the whole value proposition for buildings is going to have to change. I'm really excited for you guys in the medical in the medical industry. I mean, I think just as patients, all of us have been a patient in some way, in some aspect of our life. As people, we need medical facilities to be smarter. And now you guys are kind of this baseline feeding information to other infrastructure to, it's an incredible responsibility to implement technology.
Well, and maybe Dr. T, you could comment on this, or Victoria, around the HR constraints in healthcare. I mean, there's a shortage of doctors and nurses, right? So any help that we could provide to clinicians to be more effective is going to be valued. And I don't know, maybe you can comment better on all the ancillary staff to support the clinicians, right? The clinicians are the ones who are taking care of you and healing you. All the other administrators are there to support the clinicians. But I think what's happened in the last few decades is the amount of support staff has gone like this, right? Because there's so few clinicians. How can we address that? Like, wouldn't it be better if you could focus on care and have a lot of that administration be more automated? Would it be helpful if a smart hospital or a smart physician office building could take care of some of that administration?
Vicki?
I mean, I work in a much larger health system than David has a private practice, and I'm at Penn in a large health system. But I would say yes. I mean, I think, as Matias said, we have a huge volume of administrators and other many people that I probably don't even know are in my department, sort of helping with the day-to-day sort of functions of how we practice as physicians. Sorry, there's a song going off in the background. Every time they play Here Comes the Sun, it means a COVID patient is being discharged from the University of Pennsylvania. If you're
saving lives.
Someone's leaving now, basically.
That's great.
So, but I would say that anything we can automate, anything we can make more efficient, anything that we can make easier on nurses, physicians, staff members, front desk clerks, I mean, anything that we can do to sort of help the process would only make medicine better. We spend a lot of our days doing sort of, not that we shouldn't do administrative work, but doing administrative work that has nothing to do with patient care, whether it's addressing a frozen computer in Epic, or whether it's finding someone's referral that never came in because someone forgot to call for it, or the patient. So there's so many sort of.
And I are giggling because we've had our own set of challenges the last couple days.
So many small things that take away from ultimately our goal, which is to take care of patients to the best of our ability. And I think that as we sort of recover from this pandemic and that we have this massive backlog of patients that we need to see, I think if we can automate the process, make it more efficient, make it smarter, and make that part of our jobs easier, it would only sort of help with patient care and the ultimate goal of keeping people healthy out of hospitals, actually, and safer at the same time.
Makes sense.
You know, it really speaks to also taking care of you guys as medical professionals. I mean, the whole world is looking to you guys right now as our frontline heroes. I mean, you guys are you're the first responders or whatever category, you know, you want to lump, you know, medical professionals into right now, but you guys are on the front lines of fighting this, you know, global, you know, adversary. And so how can we as a society also help you guys do your job better, feel safer, and all of those kind of aspects? And I can imagine that this is something that it's hard to imagine that it's left up to the decision of individual hospitals and facilities versus kind of like a almost national strategy to streamline. And maybe that's a little bit too private public sector, but you know, this is something that I think really feeds you guys back in a way that I don't know if your infrastructure is supporting you. I don't.
Our AI right now in our hospital is like negligible. When you go onto the COVID floor, I still have to touch the door to open it up.
Mm-hmm.
The nurses are working 12-hour shifts. They are touching their mask. They can't breathe. It's a very difficult environment for them to work. You have the nurses, people bringing in the food, people on the PCT people. As a physician, you go in, you see them, and you're out in 2 minutes. It's the ancillary staff that are innately touching them, lifting up the patient. You still have to be a nurse and help them go to the bathroom.
Right.
You're touching them. Maybe the AI could monitor every time I touch that mask on my face. Every time I walk out of the room, an alarm will go off. I need to change my gown better. I touched my face. So there's all different ways you could utilize AI in that realm, but even just the doors, making that automated. I mean, when I open the door now, I use my elbow and my foot.
I know we're all trying to maneuver.
Punch it over to open the door. And the nurse is like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm not touching that.
But I think also one of the things we learned in the pandemic was that the hospitals did not have adequate investment, right? We didn't have enough hospital capacity in some cases. We didn't have enough ventilators. And then there was a massive surge of investment to get them to where they needed to be. But I think everyone recognizes the hospitals, you know, thousands of them across the country, need an investment in infrastructure. Are we going to leave that to the regional community hospital to decide to spend the money to make a smart hospital, or should that come from some other funding mechanism? I think that's a discussion that should be had, definitely, because a smart hospital is a healthy hospital, and a healthy hospital that's smart is going to make the community healthier. And the economics of that are very obvious and very clear. So I think the policymakers should be involved in this and should be thinking through how do we stimulate that so that these hospitals don't go, oh, well, you know, buying a $50 camera is a big investment, so I'm not going to do that. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? We need to put the systems in to make the hospitals more productive, to make them more safe, to help the heroes on the front line, the healthcare workers, you know, have to deal with all this. That should be coming from the society to support them.
I think people don't know how to even pay attention to this, that this is something that can contribute in such a significant way. And like you said, education, I think, and communication is everything. And so, you know, this show, the function of this show is just to give my audience a little peek into some of the interesting conversations that I have the privilege of having and help share information that's tangible and real so that, you know, it might not always be we're all a of our environments. What can we do? But I think that that is real, and that's what you guys are bringing to the table. Just what is happening right now, what information is all right, so well, with that, I think it's probably time to wrap up our conversation.
That's the internet gods giving us the hook. They're like, okay.
Exactly.
Usually me.
It usually is David, yes.
David, you did great. Your technology worked perfectly.
You did. Really did. I need to get on the computer.
Thank you guys so much for spending so much time. I really appreciate it. And I know whoever joins So thank you guys all. Have a great Friday.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Any resources that you guys want to share or links, share in the comments publicly on the YouTube video right after.